Welcome viewers to the Art Lounge Alley. This is Friday night, and you're tuning in to a special stream of the Art Lounge Alley. I'm going to be continuing on with Gil Elvgren, one of my favorite painters. He's an amazing artist. He's a huge contribution to the illustration world, to the commercial illustration world, to pin-up art. I've been going strong for 7 parts now. Now there's a lot of influences that he had as he was developing his style, as he was working his way up to being one of these amazing painters. So they've been taking up a lot of the stream. I've been covering them. So I'm going to continue on today, actually, talking about that. But first, I'm going to introduce Gil Elvgren to those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time. You guys can always catch up to all the previous streams by heading over to the video section and filtering it based off of collections. You could also, I believe in the video section, you could browse further down and you'll see folders. There's going to be one that's called special streams or highlights, depending which social media you're looking at. And you can catch up to all the previous ones, 1 through 6, where I go in depth about each and every artist. But yeah, for those of you who are just tuning in, I figured it's good to introduce you to who this is all about, who all these artists that I'm talking about influenced. So without further ado, let me introduce you guys to Gil Elvgren. That's him right there. You're looking at his beautiful work. So let's talk about him real quick. Let me introduce you guys and give you a better idea exactly before hopping on to all of his influences. So Gil Elvgren, as you guys could see, born in 1914 and was active all the way until 1980, was the most important pin-up and glamour artist of the 20th century. One of his most recognizable works is from his Coca-Cola illustrations. I'm going to show you guys. As it goes through, you'll see more. Elvgren's Coca-Cola subjects portrayed the American dream of a secure, comfortable lifestyle, but is well known for illustrations for magazine stories, often capturing timeless scenes that reflected the hopes, fears, and joys of their readers. In the field of advertising, along his Coca-Cola work, he contributed to campaigns for prominent American companies and products such as Orange Crush, Shields Beer, Sealy Mattress, General Electric, Sylvania, and Napa Auto Parts. With his work for Brown & Bigelow, the Coca-Cola, and other national advertising assignments, Gil Elvgren was much in demand as an artist. His time booked up more than a year ahead of his output. Elvgren stood out not just for his painting and advertising graphics. He was also a notable professional photographer. Long before he attended his first art class in 1933, Elvgren had been impressed by early pretty girl illustrators like Charles Donna Gibson, Howard Chandler Christie, Harrison Fisher, as well as McClellan Barkley that I mentioned, N.H. Sundblom, Andrew Loomis, Charles E. Chambers, and Pruitt Carter, all of which you can find these artists by, as I mentioned, heading over to the video section and filtering it on based on collections, and checking out the special stream folder. And you guys can see in the first, I believe it was like the first 2 parts, I talk about all these artists that I just mentioned, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, going on. Early on, Elvgren tore out magazine covers and individual pages bearing illustrations by artists he admired or who interested him, which became his ritual. These pages became a comprehensive collection that would later influence both his painting technique and his approach to particular commissions. Elvgren shared his admiration for the Brandywine School of Philosophy by painting with of painting with Norman Rockwell. The two men first became acquainted in 1947. The development of glamour illustration in the 20th century was the result of an early growth in commercial art, as printing techniques continued to evolve and improve. In the late 19th century, commercial art expanded rapidly to keep up with the demand for illustration in the new weekly and monthly periodicals and magazines. Within 10 years of Pyle's teaching, Pyle's first published illustration, the American public was introduced to the first real pinup. This idealized all-American creation, blending the girl next door with the girl of your dreams, was called into life in Boston about 1887 by the pen of Charles Donna Gibson. You guys can see that that was just the early period for pinup art, for glamour art, basically, and he was at the forefront of it. He really brought it to the next level. As you see, Charles Donna Gibson, if you guys go back to those parts, you'll see how all of them did have their moments in history, depending on the style, really, and some of them actually pioneered the style that went forward, the glamour style, or what fashion would look like. A lot of them had some influence when it comes to that. So same thing with Gil Elvgren, and this book that I have. This is actually why I'm talking about all this stuff, because I want to show you guys this collection. This book has all of his work that really goes from like the early 20s maybe, or 30s, all the way up to the 70s. So, and you could see the progress in his work, and you could see the style of the times as well, which is really interesting. You could see this like gradual progress, and each period really did have its very unique sort of appearance. All right, so that's Gil Elvgren for now. I'm going to be talking about more about Gil Elvgren as I move through all the other influences, which I'm getting to right now. J.C. Layendecker, another really amazing artist. Let's see, is this short enough for me to be able to... No, not really. Anyways, I'll do it. I'll do it just because I think it's the last time I'm actually going to be talking about Layendecker. Okay, so J.C. Layendecker was an illustrator and was considered to be an outstanding American illustrator of the 20th century. He's best known for his poster, book, and advertising illustrations, the trade character known as the Arrow Collar Man, and his numerous covers for the Saturday Evening Post. Between 1896 to 1950, 1896 to 1950, that's over 60 years, I'm going to say, or close to 60 years. He painted more than 400 magazine covers. During the golden age of American illustration, for the Saturday Evening Post alone, he produced 322 covers, and many advertising illustrations for its interior pages. No other artist, until the arrival of Norman Rockwell two decades later, was so solidly identified with one publication. He virtually invented the whole idea of modern magazine design. So this is the illustration that I stopped at last time. Beautiful work. I'm not going to go too much into it. I'm going to move on to the next painting. You guys can catch up on this one in the previous stream. So, as you could see, like, I think when it comes to influence on Gil Elvgren, I'm going to say J.C. Layendecker's influence really comes in from the vibrance of his colors. Just looking at this, he really makes these paintings pop out. And it's also with his brilliant use of white. Like, he really knows how to use it in a way that just pops the image out more. Something that is very common as well, if you notice from the other paintings, is he uses these black lines. Very simple, geometric sort of approach to his design. It's a combination of both, this like simplified geometric look coupled with these very chaotic colors and chaotic images in comparison. Of course, if you look at them on their own, they're very well done. They're very meticulous and very designerly as well. But in contrast, there is this like very simple round shape in the background with these two lines going across. In front, behind all these like three-dimensional, well-rendered, multicolored figures. And you could kind of see how this influenced Norman Rockwell. Like, if you look at Norman Rockwell and you look at J.C. Layendecker, I'm going to say J.C. Layendecker is to Norman Rockwell as Haddon H. Sundblom was to Gil Elvgren. You could see the heavy influence. In fact, the last image that I left Norman Rockwell on was something that looked very much like J.C. Layendecker. Like the design of the face, the way the face looked, how he even painted that painting resembles the style of J.C. Layendecker. But I also like how he renders hands. I think that's something that Norman Rockwell picked up on as well, but it's different. I want to say that J.C. Layendecker's approach has a little bit more of pop art kind of vibe about it. It's a little bit more, there's a lot more like highlights to them. Whereas, I'm going to say with Norman Rockwell, when he was rendering hands, there was like some grit and realism to it. The colors are more subdued, I'm going to say, but still they retain a lot of details similar to what you're seeing right now with J.C. Layendecker's work. All right, let's move on to the next one. Also, he's really good at drawing shoes as well, if you notice, like on this in this image, and you guys will see it in the next image as well, something that Norman Rockwell was excellent at as well. But despite all this, right, despite me talking about this comparison, they're still very different. Like, if you look at Norman Rockwell's other work, a lot of his other stuff, he has a very Norman Rockwell style to him. Like, it's very much his thing. And so does J.C. Layendecker. So it's really cool to see that artists are admiring each other's work and kind of learn off of each other, but still end up constructing something very unique and individualistic. So moving on here. Also love this for the reason of it, like demonstrating the times, right? It's such a timey sort of painting. That this is something that's back in like the 50s, I'm gonna say. Probably earlier. This is like 40s, probably. More so 40s. I don't think that people wore bowler hats at that time as much. In the 50s, I think people were just slowly coming off of that, like top hats and bowler hats. That's more like 30s, 40s. Less so 50s. I think people started focusing on hairstyles more during the 50s than other periods. But yeah, that alone, I think it's really, really cool. And also, what I like about his work is how he chooses colors, but they're still unified. That there's like this red, white, and yellow. And that's also present in other areas as well. Like, there's that white in the background. There's the white of his collar shirt. The red and yellow in the tie. The red and yellow of the bellhop, I guess, holding the flowers. There's this like unifying sort of element to it. And also contrast, right? Because of that white in the background. both of the characters pop out a lot. Once again, he combines both of those things as well, using geometric shapes as well, like that rectangle doesn't have much purpose other than for that contrast. Again, having to have these like very straight geometric shapes coupled with these complex lines and like organic nature of pretty much both, like the figures themselves and the flowers as well. It's like a combination of orderly with a little bit of chaos. I really like that as well. And the colors are, even though they're different and there is vibrancy to them, they're still within the same tonal range as, like, let's say a suit and the skin color. Like, it's not completely like incredibly sharp and vibrant and kind of focuses, like your eye doesn't like dart exactly towards the flowers. Your eye just kind of wanders around the entire painting, so there isn't anything that steals the focus completely. And I really like that. I like how he's able to do that. That is a skill. That is something that you acquire. That's not, I don't think that it's like inherent in some way. You do that by just practicing over and over and over again, experimenting, getting better at it. Anyways, great stuff. Moving on to the next painting. Beautiful work. Again, I'm going to say there's a lot of emotion here as well. That's something that's great. I really like how when you're looking at the face and you're looking at her, like pressing her face against her baby, you could see how even the face features kind of take shape to that, right? So it gives it even more of a connection between the two visually. Like, it's not just, her face in profile with the baby up close. It's like he makes sure to focus on that little bit of detail, like the angle of the nose, kind of. You could see that it's because she presses her face more on the baby that it's pushing her nose more towards the camera, which I think is pretty cool. That's also very clever way of giving the image more of like a natural vibe, natural feel to it. But there's something that's what I also really like about his work, and as you guys have heard saying that, his work alone was a huge contributor towards like advertising and the style of magazine editorials. Let me just look over that real quick again. Magazine designs. So there is this like really like graphic art sort of element to it, again with that use of white in the background. And as you guys will progress through these images, you'll see that it's not something that he uses as like a way to hide that he doesn't know how to do detail. Obviously that's not a problem. Just looking at her garbs, right, like what she's wearing, I think that's a very designerly sort of approach. And the fact that they share the color with the background, it's an interesting combination, because again, it's him using these geometric shapes, but these shapes resemble something that you would see a lot in older paintings, which is like this halo effect, and I think that it's clever use in this scenario, because it suggests this like holy moment, right? This like pure moment between a mother and her baby, and this connection, the sense of security that this baby is getting from such close connection with the mother. It's a holy moment. So it's interesting that he's using this geometric shape combination, and as you can see, it's not just one, it's both of them, but it's done in a way where is it supposed to be a halo, is it supposed to be a geometric shape? It kind of plays on both. And again, it's just this combination of straight lines. You see at the bottom where the candle is, it's like straight lines there, but then it's the combination of that with the chaotic designs in her clothes and what looks like flowers, some sort of flowers. I don't know the name exactly of them, but I've seen them before. He does use them often, actually. This is something that he used in another painting as well. that kind of plant. But yeah, that again suggests something more chaotic, more intricate, and it's like positioned next to something so geometric. So very good use of it. Love the hands. Love how he draws the hands with that color towards the tip of the fingers to suggest warmth. Really like that. And also very feminine, like the way that she's holding the baby from the bottom as well. It's this like very feminine sort of approach. The detail in the neck I really like you see that line that's going down towards her chest. Very subtle. It shows this like 3-dimension to it, right? There isn't a crazy amount of shadows there, but the highlights going down the middle of it really protrudes it out, which I think is pretty cool. Next we got this. And I love it. You know, I love the color use here. I think that's another thing that probably influenced Gil Elvgren is the vibrancy of his colors. Like as you guys saw in the beginning, his paintings are very different than, let's say, the predecessors. Like if you look at other painters from the previous parts of Gil Elvgren, you'll see that their work was a lot more subdued. Like their color choice was subdued, and I think it was more of a thing of the times. You know, I think there were really dark and weird times, and I guess that just kind of reflected in a lot of these artists and the colors that they chose, or that was just the style. Because if you look at like the 20s, the 30s, people predominantly wore like brownish, like these earthy colors, these dark earthy colors, like brown and black and grays. Like people would wear those suits. You know, you didn't have vibrant colors like this. Like you didn't have like orange suits or like teal suits or anything. You know, that it was very much even women wore very like subdued colors. So at the time, yeah, a lot of those artists kind of reflected that, I guess. You know, they didn't really venture into more vibrant colors. But then Gil Elvgren kind of took that and changed it around. Like you look at the stuff, and I'll show you guys the book eventually after going through all these artists, that his depictions were also very vibrant, like how he painted the women. And not only just the color of what they were wearing, but also how he colored their skin. You know, there's a lot of vibrancy to that. They really popped out from their image. And something else actually to note, and this is something that didn't really occur to me until just now, is Gil Elvgren also used these like white colors or solid colors for the background. Like you saw, there was one where the woman was standing in front of the clock, and she was like, you know, she looked displeased, and she was like making this gesture like, where were you late at night? But despite having the clock there, it's a solid green background. So that's that's another thing. Like they're able to really bring that out. And there are certain other images that you've seen where it's like this red-headed woman behind like a greenish blue, like a turquoise color. And it's this beautiful contrast, you know, but not similar to this. So there is that bit of influence as well. And I'm going to say the way that J.C. Layendecker also pops out as figures, you could see like almost all of them have this very strong presence in the painting. Whereas I want to say Harrison Fisher, for example, I'm just calling that name out from memory. I'm going to say his work was more like the figures were very much blended in with the backgrounds, you know, or close to that. They weren't as vibrant, I'm going to say, as this. All right, so just looking at this topic again, beautiful rendition of the hands, both hands, actually. I really love it. I love that it's a bit exaggerated too. Like you could see that it is very stylized, despite it being very well rendered, right? And there's a lot of detail to suggest realism. The colors that he uses for the fingers is also pretty stylized. You know, it kind of signals this idea of like what your hands would look like if it's cold outside. Certain parts would get really red, but in this case it's more of like a natural skin color. it's like orange, I guess, to the next level. The same thing with his face. So it is kind of stylized. It's kind of used for designer purposes as well to kind of work with his outfit, I'm gonna say. But I absolutely love it, and I kind of see like comic book elements. Like I could see how people are using this as a way of rendering things. Like it reminds me a little bit of Adam Hughes, just a tiny bit, and how he's painted his superhero figures and poses and such. I'm not really sure if that it was intentionally like influenced by J.C. Layendecker. You know, I'm just, I guess, recognizing similarities here and there. But anyways, going back to this, I really like how he created these folds as well. They're very natural. There isn't anything stiff about them, but yet you could tell that there is complexity to the folds. You could tell where it bends and where certain like areas drape over, but very naturally. I've seen people do stuff like whether it's capes or something of that nature, or just folds on clothes, and there's stiffness to them. But the way this is done, it's like a good in between of like a stylized version and more of like a natural rendition. Yeah, cool stuff. I like the character as well. Let's move on. Now this I've seen other people actually borrow from, like this, not exactly the same figure, but the person walking in this manner, in this profile sort of manner, using the geometric shape again in the background. Like I've seen that in a lot of recent artists as well, kind of borrowing this element. But take a look at that hand, right? The bottom left. It's insane. There's like so much detail to it, and there's some roughness to it. I guess to just suggest how much labor this person has saw. You know, his hands really have been busy. Let's see what else is there. Well, it's like it's also that combination of realism and fantasy. I want to say, like, there are certain realistic parts to, let's say, the pants, but it's just teetering on like realism and fantasy a little bit, I'm gonna say. And I really love that. I like how it just combines that, both of those things so well. Same thing with like the folds on his shirt, on the sleeve, I'm gonna say. Like, it's also really well rendered, but there's style to it. It's not exactly hyper realistic, but it's realistic enough to kind of push in that direction. Just not completely. He's really good at playing that middle ground. And also the face. I mean, incredible emotion there, right? I think the same thing there. There's something that's a little bit exaggerated, and I'm going to say it's within the chin. But it's rendered like areas around the nose, around the eyes. Even that just a little mark, I'm going to say, on the eyelashes to show this sort of reflective light that's there. I think that's a really important detail. It pops out the eye more. But yeah, him just like rendering that part and giving it so much attention balances out with other elements that kind of suggest more of like a comic bookish vibe. Very strong composition. And also the body language as well. You know, I think something sometimes people lack when they're trying to show, let's say, movement. You know, they pick certain frames of the body and its motion that might not be as appealing or show as much action. Really, that's the word that I'm looking for. Might not show as much action. Whereas this, you could see the hands are on opposite sides. That legs are also on opposite sides as well, and there's enough space in between them to suggest an aggressive sort of pose. You know, a more energetic sort of pose, which I also really dig. All right, moving on here as well. So cool composition as far as, again, really detailed, chaotic sort of lines on the figure himself. But you could see this like cross-hatching sort of that's done in the background to give juxtaposition both once again, and using the lines, the horizontal lines going across as well. And I think it's so fascinating how just those two lines can push the figure out more towards the viewer. You know, if you remove them and just have this white background, I don't think it would have the same sort of effect. Also, just incredible use of brush strokes. Like if you look at his jacket and certain areas, it's not completely filled, but he made just the right strokes, like just a couple here and there, and that was enough to pop it out, you know, or to give it some dimension. I think the subject matter is also really interesting too. It's just this idea of how, despite not having much, there's still this love for music and for art, even at his age. So I think this is like a dedication to art itself. I'm going to say the message there, which I really enjoy. Here, I think the lines are very expressive. That's what I really like. I'm not a huge fan of baseball, but I really like the pose. I like the action within the pose, and I also just like the expressiveness of the lines. So, and there's a good mix there. You know, the cross-hatching in the background, it suggests a very like ecstatic sort of moment. You know, there's a lot of energy there, and it kind of works well with the pose itself. You know, the anticipation and his like readiness to take on whatever is going to happen. It kind of works well together there. And it's just also within his pants, there's like so many chaotic lines there, and it's not completely rendered. It looks like there's just been some elements here and there. But for example, his fingers and his hands basically are so well rendered, yet they still kind of work with the rest of the body. You know, you're not just saying, oh, the hands are the focus here. It all works, you know, it all is connected. And I think the socks have something to do with it. As little as that is, the socks do have something to do with it as like a unifying element where you're not just staring at his hands and, you know, parts of the face or whatever. You're kind of taking the figure in as a whole. But still really well rendered. I really dig it. There's a lot of stuff that could be included, but he, just similar to how John Buscema, I think, draws, where he makes the right amount of lines to play that middle ground of realism and fiction. You know, you could see that there could be more lines to define, let's say, the sleeve of his jacket or the sleeve of his shirt. The same thing with the pants, but there's just enough to show action, to show diversity in the lines, you know, to make things a little bit more compelling, and yet not going overboard into like hyper-realism. Even by the external lines, you know, around the pants, the leg of the pants, you could see that it's kind of tittering on both like realism and kind of more illustration / comic book vibe. Moving on to this. I think this image also highlights the uniqueness of his style. You know, how he's painting them, it kind of looks like And honestly, I just now I remembered, I don't think this painting is exactly his. Like, I think somebody actually played around with this, because that background is so smooth, but it kind of works. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why I first accepted it as his painting. Because if you look at his other ones, right, it's like the previous ones, there's like that solid background that's present all the time, that solid white background. So I think this, because it's so solid, but it smoothly transitions from blue to yellow. Just kind of works. I don't think it ruined the image. But anyways, aside from the background difference, I think it really demonstrates something very unique about Layendecker, and that's the way he paints, like those lines there all over his legs. The guy that's sitting, the lines on his legs, the lines that you see that are on his arms as well. There's something very much Layendecker about it. Even in her face, like if you look at the forehead, that's not hair. It's just how he decided to like fill in that area using these like etchings sort of to do it. I think that's what really makes him stand out. And he combines both so well, because it kind of breaks that realism, but at the same time it doesn't, right? Like how he renders it, and notice like the direction of those lines. So like looking at the guy's leg, right? The, I guess, left leg from our view, the lines that he's making, they're in the direction of like the roundness, so it gives it dimension. It's not just straight lines, that he's using to like etch any sort of shading or color or whatever. He does it in the direction of the perspective, basically, and that's what gives it this like popped out sort of look. And the same thing with like his right leg. You could see that there's a peak, there's a place where there's a lot of light hitting. Like the peak of that muscle is getting a lot of light, and it's also rendered underneath of it to have some dimension. And on top of that, he makes these like perspective sort of lines to fill it in. So it's this very, very unique, approach to painting. But yeah, despite that being in the mix, you look at their faces and they're still very realistic. There's something about them that kind of calls out to you, and it like connects with you as a viewer, I think, which is really, really cool. No problems with anatomy there, as far as like the figure and both her, how she's positioned, and the hands in perspective. Excellent. Beautiful rendering of the fingers as well. It's very, very expressive. There's that femininity to it, and sharpness. I don't know. I guess it's kind of hard to describe. So, for lack of a better word, I'll just say that. Moving on. I love the grittiness to this. It is really gritty. I guess it's obviously, it's a bit, it's sad. It's a sad image of somebody who's homeless, and they're just looking at whatever is going on, really. I'm going to say it's something having to, I guess, be appealing to a passerby, and they're like, should I take this with me? Is that something I'm gonna use? But I love the rendition of it. Like looking at the jacket, there's like so many tiny little elements there. Just little dots and lines that he uses, along with this very well rendered three-dimensional look to it. And once again, a use of white as the background, so you could see that along with this very well rendered, even like the saw itself and what the log is on, and the log itself, like very realistic look. So, and it's cool to see it at such contrast. You know, it really pops out more. The newspaper as well, just so many variations in color there, or gradations rather, in the grays and whites as well. Really well done. Beautiful work. Moving on. Here I think you could focus more, well, it's again this juxtaposition of like complex lines and complex designs and shapes, along with like the geometry of it. The lines, of course, in the background, those two lines, the circle, which could represent the sun, right? The sun setting. But I really like how he rendered the legs of the horse. It really pops out. And also the perspective of the horse. It really looks like it's a lot closer towards the viewer, right? But it's flat. It's a flat image. So it's really cool foreshortening. It's very cool perspective that gives this image such dimensions, such 3 dimension. Also, always cool to see a painting of an American Indian or Native American. But yeah, what I really like is how he rendered the horse, and you could see the style basically that I was talking about, the very much J.C. Layendecker style of it. And again, his like harmonious sort of color combination from the Native American to the horse. They kind of blend together, but of course you could tell the difference between the two. It's not melding into one another. Very, very beautiful work. Excellent anatomy with the hands and the arm, and I'm going to say the chest as well. The awesome design of the guy, what he's wearing, you know, the headdress, I guess, that he's wearing. Very intricate details there. Overall, excellent work. Moving on. And I believe he also, J.C. Layendecker, has a lot to do with this design, like this association of like what Santa Claus looks like. And I think Haddon H. Sundblom had something to do with that. But I think they kind of influenced each other, because I think J.C. Layendecker is earlier than Haddon H. Sundblom. Let me just take a look real quick. I'm gonna say Haddon Sundblom. I didn't write down the age. I'm gonna say he was more of the early 1900s to like mid 1900s, like 1964. Like he went up to 1964, whereas Layendecker was 1951. So I think that J.C. Layendecker was really laying it down for the design, and maybe Haddon H. Sundblom just kind of took it and improvised to make it look his own in some way. I'm probably going to read through the text, and we'll get to the bottom of that later. But once again, just very contrasting sort of looks. You got that really white background, but you could see that the Santa and the kid, they're kind of in like a shadow or like a darker room with like exaggerated light. So it's kind of cool play on light source there. It's kind of contradictory to the background. You could see that there's a shadow that's being formed to the background. So there's really exaggerated sort of light source, but at the same time, it looks like they're next to like a candle or a fire of some sort, right? So it's like a little bit of both there. And that's kind of cool. That's actually eye-catching. I think that's what makes it eye-catching, as well as like, look how white that, I guess what looks like a drum, right? It looks like something like a drum with other instruments around it. But I think it's also suggestive to like the idea of like it being a holy moment again, right? And this is somebody who is considered to be like a holy character, someone who's going around the entire world delivering presents and making kids happy. So I think this is like a play on that object. So maybe a drum, maybe it's supposed to be a halo, with the instruments next to it to kind of play on that a little bit, trick the eye, if you will. So, all right, just looking at things like the hand, right? Amazing, once again, beautiful rendering there. Very characteristic. There's a lot of detail going into both hands, actually. And I really like how he rendered the hair actually on both. Like, I like how he did it on the kid. It's not crazy amount of detail, but just enough to suggest realism and style. And then looking at Santa's beard, there's like so much complexity in the colors there, as well as the lines, actually, both. There's a little bit of both. And also how he rendered the face, like the nose and eyes, just paying attention to that is so cool. There's also a wide mixture of colors there, and that transition from like a little bit of a dark red to how shiny his cheek looks, how shiny his nose looks. I love it. He does have that, actually. That's another very characteristical part about him, is that he gives a lot of shine to features like hands. Like the hand looks almost like it's kind of like glass, but not really. You could obviously tell, or it's like a little greasy, I'm gonna say. He kind of does that. He has a little bit of that going on there, but it works. You know, it doesn't look bad. It looks great. It just pops out the characters more. Okay, move on here. I think this is similar to the painting where I left off last time. And it's just like a very timely sort of example. I really like that about it as well. And his work kind of is in that interesting area, right? Because he was born in 1874. So you get to see the style that he saw of his time growing up, as well as like the boom of the 19th century, like how the style really did transition a lot, considering what they were wearing in the 1800s to like 1920s, 1930s, where all the I guess bourgeois sort of elements to their dressing style was toned down a bit. And I think this picture kind of shows the in-between of that a little bit. You know, the I guess the lavishness of her dress, but at the same time the upper part being a little bit more simplified, suggesting the edging towards like more of like Art Nouveau era, you know, that sort of time period, that sort of style. So it's like a little bit of both there. And once again, play on light source, because you see the guy and he's wearing a black suit, right? Tuxedo suit. But is blending into the background so much. You can't really see what's going on, yet their colors are so vibrant. Like her skin color looks as if though there's some spotlight directly on her, but yet there's nothing in the background that's visible. So again, this like play on extremes between the two. And I think, yeah, that's Arrow dress shirts and collars. Like I think there was another painting that he did, which he was very well recognized for, the Arrow Root Man. And I think that was earlier in the image, or it might be going further in. Love the hands. I like how the hands are positioned, and the expression on both of the hands, like the curvature to the top left hand on her, and then the curvature going towards the bottom. It's very feminine. It's very elegant. And I really like that. Here, this is an interesting sort of comparison between men of the times, right? This is like 1628, and those were the men on the battlefield, doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And then there is like 1928, where the battlefield is the football field, basically. So the amount of like hard hits that they had to take, you could tell by how ripped up his clothes is. And at that time, look at how much protection and padding they had. Not that much compared to now, you know, compared to how much padding they have. So it was really brutal at that time, I would imagine. Like, football was just wrecking people. I mean, that's probably why there's so much padding now, because there were so many injuries. I mean, even now I think people are getting like spinal injuries that are just irreversible, or they're completely paralyzed. You know, it's even worse. But anyways, yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting sort of look at time and history again, right? Like, that's what their getup used to look like back in the day. That's what an average person in 1628 would wear, and then you see somebody in 1928. Yeah, it's a cool. I thought it was a very interesting thing, and he does a lot of contrasting sort of work. So here it's also present. You got that white background, you got these complex lines, you got something natural like the plant combined with geometric shapes, and all these like chaotic lines that are on the figures as well. And of course, with the times being totally different as well, right? 1628 to 1928. Again, these like really polarizing sort of comparisons. So all of it together kind of screams J.C. Layendecker. Here, this is something that's a lot different than, like, in comparison to the other one that we saw where they were dancing in a ballroom, right? This is something that's also a change of time, where you see the colors that are so vibrant as opposed to like that black and white and sort of solid, simplified version. But I really like the composition here and the use of color. And again, this is more designerly than anything else. Like, it's not as, I guess, suggestive, but to look at it from like an interesting perspective, you could see that maybe it's just this combination of somebody who feels, I don't know, as a gesture, and he's in love with something that is so beautiful and elegant and, I don't know, angelic. Let me just say that. So it could be this idea of how somebody feels like a fool, yet they're totally in love with something that they're mesmerized by, you know, or they don't feel like as if though they kind of fit in with them, suggesting by it's like his kneeling in a way, right? But mainly I really like the color choice here and the vibrancy of the colors that he used. Really cool work. Here, this is another perfect example of his contrast as well, like looking at the design on his clothes, right? There's like so many intricate little details there, and I'm gonna say this is like Rococo style. This is something that is known for like it's like a period of design, I'm gonna say, that had these very like lavishing and intricate details that are put into like furniture and buildings and so on and so forth. So that's kind of present, and it's a juxtaposition to next to like very angular and geometric shapes again. Combination of both. But compositionally, it's all very well done. So many different colors, notice as well, right? You got the blue of the metal that's hanging around his neck, all the colors and the flowers, all the colors and designs within the guy's outfit as well. But it all works. It doesn't, nothing is like really screaming out attention. Gonna see if I could actually get past JC Layendecker tonight so that I can move on to the next artist, who's also another, I'm gonna say the next one is pretty interesting. I'm not a huge fan of the work, but he is a pretty important figure, and his focus is different. How he tells his interests, how he displays his interests is also very unique. But anyways, yeah, going back to this, what I really like about it is the action, the pose between the two is really great. It really shows that impact between the two, and that's also complemented by like the etchings in the background, and just kind of suggests this energy that's exploding between the two. I really like that. And how it just has a little bit of that illustration feel to it. It's a combination of both. Like, I like how there are these like the lines that you see on the guy's face, on the guy at the top right. Just seeing the lines on his cheeks there. It's fantastical, and at the same time, it's mixed in with that realism that I really enjoy. All right, moving on to this. This is just purely about face expression, just how well he was able to capture that, and how characteristical these features are, from the hands to the nose. It looks like a lot of fun to draw, the eyes and mouth, all that stuff. And I really like the little white marks that are around there, because it's stylistic, but it's also making sense to the area to suggest that this guy's like scruffy. There's some bit of facial hair that's growing in, but there's fluidity to it as well. Like, I really like the fluidity to the hair, and the natural poses of the hands, of the fingers. That's really well rendered as well. It's not complete yet, it's so alive, right? There's not that much detail, but everything that is present on the canvas has such liveliness to it. This is kind of showing the process as well. What's interesting to note is that he uses a technique that's been used for a very long time, which is creating a grid, basically, and having that grid present as a way of measuring the distance. Like, how I talk about paying attention to the relationship between objects. Well, this is kind of what this is. You're paying attention to the distance between that very outer edged line that's going down and like the toe, and that's kind of useful for the subject that you're studying as well. So what they would have is they would have this kind of like net, right? Or they would have this transparent grid, and it would be at a distance, and it's going to be in front of the subject. So let's say there's a guy and he's actually playing this guitar. There's this like net, let's say on rollers, and he brings it up to that person, and that net presents like this grid. And then they create that same grid on their canvas, and they're able to actually have more of an accurate sort of rendition. It allows them to make sure that things are proportionate. So, for example, you see how his head is kind of in that square, right? Well, probably that grid that I was talking about that's on wheels, that's in front of the subject, it's probably in that square and on that grid as well. And it's a lot easier to look at just that little square section and compare everything in relation to all those lines and get that accuracy, as opposed to just kind of freehanding it. So it helps the process, it speeds things up a little bit, and that's what you're seeing right here, that you're seeing that grid system. And that grid system has been used for centuries. It's not something new. to that period of his paintings or anything. It's been, I don't know, can't really date it, but 1400s for sure. It was used during that time period as well. But yeah, it's just a cool little sketch, sort of. It doesn't look like a sketch. It looks finalized to me. You know, you could see him practicing the hand as well at the top before he actually like committed to a certain look. And there's something about his painting that also is a in between of like pastel, right? His style, that's kind of, I think what's cool about it is that how he paints also tricks the eye to believe that it's a different medium, that it's not actually oil, that it could be marker, it could be pastel, it's oil, you know, or it could be digital even. Like looking at that white, it's so vibrant, you know, and how he was able to go and paint the subject within it. It's just something that I would see when it comes to digital. And at that time, it wasn't even a thing, you know, so he wasn't actually able to like mimic that or suggest that. So maybe he was just like ahead of his time. But obviously, he was, you know, he presented a new style of design, basically, that a lot of people, even to this day, are borrowing from that. Like I still see like modern artists who are kind of taking that on. Anyways, cool little glimpse into his process and some of the things that he was doing. And that's pretty much it, ladies and gents. That was J.C. Layendecker. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I absolutely loved it. Every moment of it. I know I'm going to miss it too, and I'm going to move on to the next artist. And we're going to be looking back to this because this is an experience. This is not something that I'm going to be, you know, talking about or showing you guys every day or, you know, anytime soon. This is just another moment. So I'm a little bit sad. I'm excited, and at the same time, I'm a little bit sad that I'm going to have to, gonna call it a finish line for J.C. Layendecker. If you guys want to see more of this stuff, you know, if you have like some sort of attachment to any of these artists, you know, throw it in the chat. Send me a message. Say you want to see more of this work, and I'm gonna do more research and find other illustrations that I could bring up and talk about and discuss. But yeah, just send me some feedback. Let me know what you guys think. If you want to see more of this work or not. So just a quick can't talk. Been talking all stream. Just a quick sneak peek to who you're going to be seeing next. It's going to be... Should I actually reveal it? Should I show you guys who it is, or have you guys wait and see? I think I'm going to have you guys wait and see. It's going to be interesting. His work is also really unique. His story is also really unique. So I'm going to be introducing you guys to that next Friday. So Friday comes around, new special stream. Make sure you tune in then to find out who this next artist is. Thanks for joining me, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. If you did, just remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Send me your comments. Share your thoughts. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. Hope you're practicing. Hope you're putting in the time to improving your craft, drawing and painting. This is meant to really inspire you guys more than keep you at awe. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you Monday.